have today Rev Up winning the listing, negotiating the sale. It's really more of winning the listing. Is really what we're focusing on today, that listing presentation. We'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to go through the module and I may like add a bunch to it. So we'll see. But anyways, that's the plan today. As always, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand there on your little Zoom screen. You can unmute yourself. You can throw it in the chat box. Just if you unmute yourself, just interrupt me. And sometimes I watch so I can see who's unmuted themselves. So oftentimes I'll call on you if I see you've unmuted yourself because I assume you want to say something. All right, so let's get started anyways. If I can get my slides to work. There we go. All right. So our learning objectives today are the listing appointments, tips for winning sellers and securing the listings. Again, we're not going to talk so much about marketing and serving the listing or negotiating the sale right now, because we're really going to talk more about that next week when we have our contract to close for listings. So we'll cover most of that next week. So moment of truth, right? Last week we talked about the pre-listing, the research that we're going to do, setting yourself up for success. So hopefully at this point, when we're getting ready to show up for that listing appointment, you've utilized that pre-listing questionnaire. You've qualified the seller to make sure that they are a ready, willing, and able seller, right? That the potential of them actually listing their house is pretty solid. You also want to gather all that pertinent information about their house when you set that listing appointment, so that when you go to pull comps and stuff, you have a pretty good idea of what you're walking into. Hopefully you've done preparation, including gathering that information, visiting the community, right? Driving by, reviewing comparables. You should have created the effective pre-listing package and delivered it to the client. Okay, so that was all what we talked about last week. The pre-listing package, again, should include I like to include a copy of the comparative market analysis, right? The market analysis of the property, so they kind of have an idea. Hopefully on that pre-listing questionnaire, you ask them what they thought they were going to list the house for, so that you have an idea of whether you're going to be in the ballpark or not. In addition, that pre-listing package is going to have your pre-listing presentation, which should introduce yourself, your marketing objectives, all of those things, so they can be reviewing that information before you get to their door. And in addition, you may want to include, excuse me, copies of things like maybe the residential listing agreement, the RLA, maybe the disclosure information advisory, potentially a copy of the blank copy of the TDS and the SPQ. All those forms are going to be blank, just so they have copies of the things that they're going to have to fill out and answer questions on. So that's what my goal is, to drop off on their doorstep, ideally like 2 days before that listing appointment, but at the very least a day before the listing appointment, so that when I show up on their door, I'm asking if they've had a chance to review that information. It's going to make your listing presentation go way smoother if they've reviewed that in advance. Conducting the listing presentation. Okay, the listing appointment is going to be one of the most important aspects of your business. As with everything that I say, it's crucial to create systems and processes around the listing presentation and follow that effective, systematic plan. If we have a system and process around our listing presentation, and we get through 5, 6, 7 listing presentations and we haven't gotten a signed agreement, it makes it really easy for us to go back to our system and say, what are we doing that's not working right? Where do I need to practice with my accountability partner? What do I need to tweak or change? Why are people not choosing me, right? So it makes it easier to go back and tweak it. If we just like fly off the seat of our pants at every listing appointment, we do nothing the same, we get to the end of 7, we still don't have any listing agreements, it makes it really hard for us to pinpoint exactly why it is that we don't have a signed listing agreement. If that's the way you operate, it's probably because you're operating that way. I'm sorry to say it. That's actually how I prefer to operate. But when we are doing business, we should have systems and processes in place to follow so that we can tweak and adjust as necessary. The goal when we walk into that listing appointment is that we are walking out with a signed listing agreement. Okay. I, as much as anybody else, appreciate digital paperwork and digital signatures on things, and it makes it so much cleaner and I don't have to go back and scan something. But please do me a favor, take a listing agreement with you to that listing presentation with the goal that you're going to fill it out and get it signed while you're sitting there at their kitchen table. Okay, that's what you should walk in. We talk rarely. I should probably talk about it more about daily affirmations or affirmations on days that you have listing appointments. You really should go into that stating affirmations. I'm going to nail my listing presentation. The miners are going to list their house with me. Like, right, we're setting ourselves up for success before we even get to their door by believing and walking to their door, knowing that we're going to take that listing. When we go into the listing presentation, you can break it into about 4 separate sections, right? The first section is going to be the greeting and outline of your presentation. That's where you're going to go over just like any presentation, right? If I go back on this one, I covered my objectives for today. You're going to do the same thing with sellers, okay? When you get there, you're going to walk them through what your plan is for the listing appointment, just those bullet points. Home tour is the second section in connecting with the client. Then you're going to do the actual presenting, including pricing and marketing strategies. And then section 4 would be closing for the listing and completing the paperwork. Okay. For your listing presentation, make sure that you arrive early for the appointment. If you haven't taken notes about the community, if you hadn't had a chance to drive through it yet, that's a good opportunity to just kind of drive through a couple blocks surrounding their house, take notes of anything that might be relevant to the appointment. Arrive a few, don't arrive late. It just doesn't bode well. I don't want to arrive too early either, right? There's like this thin line of like too early versus too late, right? Like, so my goal is to get to the area of the house, like probably 15 minutes before my appointment. But the reality is I'm going to walk up to the door at about 3 minutes before the set appointment time. I don't want to catch them off guard and show up like 15 minutes early or 10 minutes early. I want to be within that like 5-minute window of like before the appointment. You can decide what works best for you, but don't arrive late. Make sure that you dress the part, especially if you're meeting people that you've never spoken with before. Make sure you come across as professional. Even I, for a listing appointment with somebody I do not know, put my hoodie in the closet and wear something appropriate. I know it's hard for anybody to believe, but it's the truth. Be neat and organized and well prepared for the appointment. Even though you've dropped off that pre-listing packet ahead of time and you're hoping they had a chance to review it, we're going to bring a copy of everything with us. Okay, so we're going to have a copy. Hopefully they have their copy, and we're going to go from there. Make sure you turn the ringer off your phone as well. Okay, if there's something that would cause you to want to look at your phone, maybe you have a sick child at home, or maybe you have, I don't know, you're waiting for an important phone call from a doctor or something like that, that would cause you to want to interrupt that appointment to answer a phone for any reason. When we do our greeting and we introduce ourselves, we're going to introduce that to our sellers as well and say, 99% of the time I never answer my phone during my listing appointment. However, I've got a sick kid at home. He knows I'm in an appointment right now and only call me if it's an emergency. But if my kid does call me, I'm going to have to excuse myself and answer it. Is that going to be okay? Right? People understand that we all have families and lives and things going on. So we just want to set that expectation ahead of time. If there was anything that was going to cause you to want to look at your phone. Okay, if there's nothing that's going to want to cause you to look at your phone, ideally, I would say don't even bring it with you. Unless you're going to use it to like take notes or something, but make sure you do turn that ringer off. When approaching the front door, take notes of anything relevant to the curb appeal, right? My goal with being at their house and doing the listing presentation is going to allow me time to take notes and make recommendations once we have that signed listing agreement of things they need to do to the house in order to prepare it to sell. So curb appeal is important. Is the grass overgrown? Are there weeds? Are there shoes piled up on the front porch? Like, what are the things that you want to note so that they know how to stage their house appropriately for sale? When knocking on the door, knock on the door, take a little step back so that you're not crowding the homeowner as they answer the door. That's a good practice for any time you knock on somebody's door. Make sure you greet your clients warmly and professionally. Offer to remove your shoes, even if they don't ask you to. It shows respect for them and their home, regardless of the condition. Even if they have their shoes on, would you like me to remove my shoes? Okay. I have a habit of removing my shoes because we do that in our house. And I feel weird walking in somebody else's house with shoes on, even if they wear shoes, because I don't wear shoes in my house and I would want them to remove mine or theirs if they walked in mine. So, but always ask. A lot of times people are like, oh no, it's totally fine, but you showed that respect. You want to make sure that you take and keep control of the appointments. Does anybody know how to stay in control of the appointment? You throw it in the chat box, unmute yourself. Anybody got ideas? No. All right. It's a good thing everybody's here today. One main way to stay in control of the appointment is to ask questions. You be in charge of asking the questions. Anytime they ask you a question, you're going to answer it and you're going to ask them a question right back as part of your answer. In addition, if they say, oh, where would you like to sit? Highly recommend saying, let's sit at the kitchen table if they have one, or let's sit at the, somewhere where you can sit around. Ideally, we talk about the kitchen table because important decisions are made around the kitchen table, not sitting on the living room couch. Okay, so it's always better to sit at a table, ideally, again, the kitchen table or dining room table, than like sitting around the living room or whatnot. It just makes it more professional and it puts them in the mindset of decision making. If they offer you a glass of water, please say yes. Even if you're like, ooh, this house is kind of gross and I'm not sure I want to drink out of their water cups, please say yes. They're making a gesture of offering something to you and you should accept that offer. Let's see here. When sitting, make sure to face all the decision makers. You want to see the reactions as they happen and rather than looking right to left. So sit at a place where you can see all the decision makers. And then also remember that your body language is super important. And when we walk into a listing appointment, our ideal body language is going to mirror and match the body language of the sellers of that home. So if they're, walk up to the door like, I'm not looking forward to this, like we're going to cross our arms too and have the same conversation. We're going to slowly release our arms after starting that conversation with them, because oftentimes if they're sitting there with their arms crossed and we cross our arms and then we slowly release them, it's going to disarm them as well and cause them to release their arms and begin opening up to us. If they're talking slow and cautiously, we want to slow our tone down to match their tone so that we're speaking on the same level as them. And if they're like in a rush and hurry, then we're going to speed up our tone to match that as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. Body language as well as tonality and speed and all of that. We want to kind of mirror and match those clients. Let's see here. You're going to run your outline through the presentation, let them know what to expect. And then at that point, you're going to be able to get started. All right. We're going to start with the home tour and connecting with the client, right? So once you've outlined, hey, our goal today is that we're going to sit down. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of your property to see the condition of it, as well as make some notes so that when we decide to partner with each other, so that I can help you sell your property or what I can sell your property for you, I can make suggestions of things that are going to help your home to show better. Does that sound good? Absolutely. After I'm done with that walkthrough, then we'll come back. We'll go over any questions that you may have, walk you through the presentation. Did you have a chance to look at the information that I dropped off on your door a couple days ago? Oh yeah, we did have a chance. Perfect. Any questions that you have from that, I'll answer them at that time. And then we'll talk about what it looks like to move forward. Does that sound good? And notice as I'm saying, does that sound good? I'm shaking my head yes, right? I'm trying to get them in a habit of answering yes to my questions. Okay. And by body language saying yes, they're going to be like, yes, that sounds good. I'm a robot. Okay. It's okay for listing sellers to be robots. Okay. When you tour the home, I like to do it. There's a couple different ways that you can tour the home. Okay. The first way is that you could walk through the home by yourself. You could say, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the home as if I'm a buyer to the property. That way I can see it as a buyer is going to see it. Because as you know, when we are showing the property to prospective buyers, you're not going to be here to walk them through the home. So I'm just going to take a quick walkthrough. I'm going to make some notes of things maybe that I've noticed or that I would change. While I'm doing that, can you fill out this list or this paperwork or write down, anything that you think I should know about your home that I may not see just by looking through it, right? So I'm giving them homework while I'm doing the walkthrough. That's one way to do the walkthrough. The other way to do the walkthrough is to invite them to come with you. It's going to take you a little bit longer. It's not going to be as efficient or effective. You're also not going to see it like a buyer's going to see it, but it's going to give you time to build rapport with that seller. So there's no wrong or right way. You could do it either way. So as you tour the home, you want to make sure you're taking notes not only of the home, but you're listening to what they say about the home. You're going to take notes about that, and you're going to begin that discussion with them about why they're looking to sell, right? We should have already asked that while we were in the pre-listing phase, right before we sat down with them during that seller questionnaire that we asked them. We should know why they're looking to sell and what their plans are, and we can dig deeper into those. Okay, so if there's there's nothing special about the bedrooms or whatever, then it becomes a conversation of, oh, so I know when we talked on the phone, you said that you were looking to move out of state and you weren't sure exactly where you wanted to go. Have you given it any more thought? Oh, yeah, we've narrowed it down to 2 states. Oh, that's fabulous. Do you have a plan to go visit those 2 states or why those 2 states, right? We're going to dig into it a little bit more because our goal is to determine their why for selling so that we can be that constant reminder of reminding them what the goal is and what the anticipated outcome is. The other thing that I will say walking into the listing appointment is we should know, again, why they're wanting to sell and kind of what their mood is related to that. Some people are selling because they are military and they are PCSing to another base and they may not want to move. So they may not be excited about selling their house. And we need to make sure we mirror and match that. Or maybe they're getting a job change, or maybe their mom's sick and they're moving home to take care of elderly parents. And they're like, man, we really love our community and we hate to sell, but this is what we've got to do. Like, this is the right thing. If we move my parents out here, we're taking them away from all their doctors and everything. So we're going to move to Louisiana and move in with my parents for a couple of years so we can help take care of them. After all, they did raise us for 18 years, right? That shows you they're not excited about the move and they're not going to be excited about selling their house. So if you come in and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Thank you for interviewing me for this process. I'm so excited to get your house sold for you and get you moving on to the next chapter of your house, of your, life. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, this person is not for me. This is not where I'm at with selling this house. So just make sure you take their emotional state into consideration when going through this process, right? All right. So again, you can use like the top features of your home to engage homeowners in the process as you do the tour. Measurement, let's see. Okay, as you tour the home, as I mentioned before, you're going to take note of the homeowner's interests as well, right? So we can meet them on a personal level. You can take some look at the pictures on the walls, right? So find things that you have in common with them. If your children and their children are in sports, or your children used to be in sports, or you used to be in sports, use that as an opportunity to connect. And follow a system when you do house walkthroughs. So again, remember I said it's all about systems and processes. So like if you always start in the kitchen and then you work your way through the dining and living rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, laundry. What I like to do is I like to kind of start where the door would be, right? And then walk into the house, and then I just kind of follow the flow of the house through. So if you walk in, and then you've got the kitchen and dining room, then I would go that way. If there's a hall, then to the bedrooms, I would follow that around, right? So I'm just going to kind of, I had a home inspector one time and he would walk in and then hug the wall and follow the wall around the house as it went through all the rooms. And that's kind of the same method I take when I do my walkthroughs. I try to keep it very systematic. And it's okay to say, hey, let's start in the bedrooms, or I like to start out in the backyard. So that way, again, you're staying in control of that appointment, not, well, what would you like to see first, homeowner? Just let them know what your plan is to walk through that house. Any questions about the home tour and connecting with the client? All right, fabulous. We have a quiet group today. We have a large group, but we're all very quiet. All right. After we've completed the home tour, oftentimes too, I don't send the notes to the sellers right away until they've signed my listing agreement, right? Those are my notes about their home. And if they're going to go sign with another agent, that agent can give them notes. So oftentimes I let them know that, hey, what I'll do is once we're wrapped up here, these aren't very legible notes that I made as I walk through the house. So I'll make them a more legible format. And then I'll shoot them over to you in an email and answer any questions that you might have about things. But the things that I'm looking for are just ways to like arrange furniture a little bit better or clean things up a little bit, just to make your home show in the best possible light that it can. Does that make sense? And they're gonna be like, yeah, absolutely, perfect, right? So I've already set them up that, hey, they'll get the list later. All right. The next step is going to be to present and marketing and pricing strategies. I wouldn't worry too much about selling yourself. Oftentimes, okay, so we walk in, set stuff down on the kitchen table, ideally, right? So that we know we're coming back there to have the discussion. I introduce the listing presentation, what kind of my process will be. Hey, I'm going to do the walkthrough first, then we'll come back, answer any questions that you may have. Talk about like strategies, go through the information that I dropped off with you, and then we'll talk about what the next steps look like. Does that sound good? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So then we go on the home tour, whether they go with me or not. And then we come back to the table and I go, first off, I know you said you had time to review that packet of information. What questions do you have for me? Right? Let's get to the nitty gritty of it and just ask them what questions they have. If they hadn't had a chance to review the packet, no problem. I know that you didn't have time to review the packet. That's totally okay. We can go through that here today in as much detail as you would like. But what questions do you have before we get started, right? I'm trying to handle those objectives before we even dive into the material. So we're going to ask what questions they have. Anytime we have objections, we want to identify, isolate, and then handle, right? So we want to make sure, oh, cool. Is there anything else that concerns you about the home buying process, or do you have any additional questions, right? And then we're going to address those and move on. I don't worry too much about diving into, oh, I'm with, Realty One Group, and we've been in business since the end of the ages, and our office sells hundreds of homes a year, right? I don't go into that as much because people ultimately don't care about the company. Okay, they want to know what you're going to do for them and how that's going to help you get their home sold, or help them get their home sold. So if there's facts that come up like, oh, well, we have, a organization, through Realty One Group, we have a community of other agents that I can share and market it with across the nation. We have access to these avenues in order to help get your property sold. We can create professional marketing materials. Here's some examples. That's where I would pull it in as like backing me up and creating that validity, but I'm not going to worry so much about like going through all the details of the company. They don't care. If you have an extensive or an amazing resume, you may want to cover some of the finer points of that. I would not spend 10 minutes talking about yourself because it's not about you. It's about getting their home sold and how you're going to help them do that. Okay. I'm just looking through what the information is before I continue on. You don't want to jump in about price. Ideally, if there are questions about price, if they're like, oh, what do you think we should list it at? That might be something that you say, well, let's talk about kind of our plan and what makes sense. And then we'll dive in and look at kind of where I would recommend listing the property. Does that sound good? Right. So we're going to put that off because we want a chance to make sure that we answer any questions they have about marketing, to make sure we cover our marketing plan, to make sure that we're going to go over, all of that before we dive into just a price, because we don't want them to be unhappy with the price at the very beginning of the presentation and then tune us out for the remainder of it. Okay. Always start by thanking them for the opportunity to work for them, right? I know you have many choices as real estate professionals, and I don't take that knowledge lightly. In fact, no doubt you're anxious to learn the results of my market research, and I will want to get to it right away. If you indulge me, I'd like to take a couple minutes first to review your hiring criteria along with the review of my qualifications. Will that be okay? And the seller's gonna be like, yeah, that's okay, right? Reviewing what you've learned to ask. If there's anything else, be prepared. Oh, be prepared to think on your feet, as always. So you may want to ask, like, what's important to them about choosing a real estate professional, right? If you've already had this question with them, then it's really easy to say, hey, when I asked you that, this is what you said, right? I want somebody who communicates with you on a regular, timely basis, and that you want frequent updates on activities, showings, feedback from buyers and agents. Is that correct? You also said that you wanted a professional, and that to you, that means someone with polish, experience in the industry, and someone who can speak and write well. Is that correct? Right? So not only at some point did they ask, hey, what's important to you in a real estate professional, but they said, oh, I want somebody that's professional. Dig into that. What does that mean to you? Right? So if we're having the conversation at the table, what's important to you about choosing a real estate professional? If we didn't ask that previously, they might be, well, somebody who communicates. Perfect. What does a good communicator look like to you? Right? Perfect. All those things. What else is important to you in your real estate professional that you're going to hire to sell your house? Well, somebody who's professional. Perfect. What does that mean to you? Right? We always want to dig deeper and find out what specifically that means so that we can address those things directly. If somebody says, oh, I want somebody who's professional, and you're like, well, yeah, absolutely. And you have one definition of professional, but what they're thinking is something else. We may not address their concern. So we want to make sure we dig deeper. Let's see, what else is important to you, right? We're going to keep asking what's important to you about the real estate professional that you hire to sell your home, until they're like, I think that's it. I think that's all I can come up with. Gosh, I think somebody who's professional, somebody who communicates well, and somebody who is willing to go over all the steps with us to make sure that we understand the process. This is our first home that we're selling, right? So, so they might mention things like that. But we're going to continue to ask, is there anything else that's important to you? Even if we asked it as part of our pre-listing process, right? That seller questionnaire, we asked what's important to them. Sit down at the table, we're going to clarify those items, make sure that we have it accurate. And then we're still going to ask, is there anything else that's important to you about the real estate professional that you hire to sell your house? Okay. If we want to make sure that we address those, if we haven't addressed them already in the packet or don't have planned to address them, we want to make a mental note to make sure that we reach each of those things. So make sure that you're taking notes to make sure that you can cross all those things off at the end. Does anybody have questions about that process? Okay. Let's see, I'm just skipping over because I already talked about that. And I do have notes that I go off of in case you guys were wondering. We should have had a conversation with them about what their ideal time frame is, right? That's part of that seller, the pre-listing questionnaire that we qualified them with. We want to re-verify that information and then make sure that that's still true. If they said, oh, well, we are, we have a job change, and we're looking to move in the next, we really need to have the house on the market in the next 30 days with the intention that we will be handing keys over on day 60 after we list it, or within 3 months, right? Then we may want to confirm that information. I know when we talked on the phone, you said that, this move is based on a job change, and you were getting all your ducks in a row, but it looked like your husband was starting his new job, or Mark, you were starting your new job. Let's see, this is March, April, May 30th. Is that still accurate? Are you starting your new job May 30th? And ideally, how long do you want in travel time, or How long do you want after you sell this house to head that direction? And are you buying a home there where your new job is, or are you listing? Are you leasing a home, renting a home, right? So find that information out. I like to, just so you know, if any of my sellers are talking about moving to other areas, I always let them know that sometimes the best time to go look in the other area or go explore which state it is that you're really looking to move to is kind of that first week we put the house on the market. Oftentimes it's kind of busy with showings and activities. And instead of you being inconvenienced and having to leave and be gone half the time, that's a good time to plan a trip to go look at the location where you're getting ready to move to, right? Get them out of the house for a week. It's magic. All right. Just keep in mind too that all sellers are different, right? They all have different hot buttons and needs. And so we just want to make sure that we address each of those hot buttons and that we address each of those needs as we move through our listing presentation. So even though our listing presentation is going to be systematic, there's going to be a process to it. Each one's going to be different depending on the person that we're talking to. All right. Once we have addressed all their concerns, my idea too would be that you want to cover kind of your marketing strategy or ask them if they had a chance to review that, if they have any questions about that. Maybe if they have had a chance to review that, then you're going to remind them that we do a bunch of in-person marketing as well as digital marketing on different platforms. So anytime we host an open house, I'm going to door knock the neighborhood to make sure all the neighbors are aware, because they're going to be our best referrers for buyers. They already know, love this neighborhood. And there probably know people that want to move to this neighborhood because it's such a great neighborhood. So we're always going to talk to the neighbors. We're going to market it on digital platforms. I'm going to market your home to other areas where I think people might be moving from, so that they're aware, especially places like Sacramento or the Bay Area. If the house is in Vacaville, this is a much better area. Your money goes a lot further than it does in San Francisco. So we get a lot of people that are now commuting from here to San Francisco. So I'm going to market to those people as well. We're going to kick it out to our network of thousands of agents that we have across the country, in case anybody has buyers that are looking to move to this area, right? So we might want to revisit that and talk about how we're going to do that. Do you mail out postcards? Right? Address that. Do we host open houses every weekend? What's your plan? And remember, open houses don't sell listings, but the sellers don't really know that. They think they help sell listings. For us, they're a lead generation tool. So we always talk about leads from listings. Make sure that you are addressing that and setting yourself up for success to open the door to host those open houses. The other thing that we may want to address is we often get calls from the signs in the front yard. People are driving by, they're dropping kids off at friends' houses and stuff, and then all of a sudden they see a house for sale and they think, man, this is a great neighborhood. Maybe I should move here. So it's really important that we have that sign in the front yard. Does that make sense? People are going to be like, oh yeah, that does make sense. Sometimes people are embarrassed to put like a for sale sign in their front yard. We want it there because it's a lead generation tool. So we're going to sell it to them as it's going to help sell their house. Okay, so we're going to talk about that marketing plan. Once we've kind of done that, then we want to move into our pricing strategy. Okay, any questions? Are we good? All right. Pricing conclusions, right? We want to make sure that they understand that coming up with an asking price that attracts buyers and an offer made in a timely manner is not an exact science, right? It's kind of like hitting a moving target. So we may want to mention the fact that when I sent over that CMA, did you have a chance to review that? Oh yeah, we kind of looked through that, but we weren't sure how to interpret the data. No problem. That's why I'm here today. It's kind of walk you through that. We're going to look at houses that sold, because that's when we put your house in contract and there's an appraiser that comes out and does an appraisal, they're going to look at the sold data and they're going to justify the value that we're in contract for based on that sold data. So that's why you're going to see sold homes in there. Okay. And you may want to take a moment to go through like what the sold homes look like. So we have an exact model match to yours. Although, I walked through that one and I walked through this one and yours is much nicer, but that one sold at, $562,000. And then we've got one that's slightly bigger that sold for 570. We've got one that's slightly smaller that's also really nice, just like yours, for like 555. So that's what the appraiser is going to look at. So whatever we do and wherever we put your house in the contract at, we're going to have to be able to justify it to an appraiser, because about 90% of properties require an appraisal to be completed before we can close escrow. Okay. Now, what we also look at is we're going to look at those properties that are pending, because those are the ones that were priced appropriately to actually get buyers to make offers on their homes. So those are important homes. They're kind of an indicator of where the market is going and what's going to cause it to get offers. Okay. So the properties that are pending, and again, we don't exactly know. In fact, I reached out to all these agents already to find out what those houses are pending at. And I was able to get answers on a couple of them, but a couple of them the agents wouldn't say, which isn't uncommon. So we know that we've got pending properties here, here, and here, right? So we can go over that with them and kind of what our thought process is and how we move through that. And then we've got these active properties, right? The ones that are still on the market, which might be new on the market, so they haven't had a chance to get an offer yet. Or we can see here, like this one listed at 580, which is the same model as yours. It's been sitting on the market for 60 days. So that tells us that's maybe a little too high for what the market can support for the square footage in the neighborhood. Does that make sense? And they're gonna be like, oh yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Like, I don't want my property sitting on the market for 60 days, right? So we can go over all that with them, in detail during that appointment. And then we would talk about, so if I was making a recommendation for the list price of your property, I would probably list it somewhere between, 560 and 570, because if you look at these properties that sold between 560 and 568 that we have marked here, see how they went into contract really quickly, and it was actually listed a little lower than that, but they sold for a little bit more. So I think by listing in that range, that's going to bring us a good pool of buyers with the potential that we might be able to get an offer fairly quickly. Would that work for you? I know that you said your time frame was you would really like to have this house sold in the next 45 days. If we were to get it on the market in 2 weeks and have an offer within that first week, does that work? Oh yeah, absolutely. That does work. Perfect. So I would say that listing range that we want to be able to do that in is going to be between this and that. And they're going to be like, perfect. Absolutely. That makes sense. And again, we already had the conversation of what do they think their home is valued at? Or what do they think the market value of their home is? So we know that we're going to be in line with their desires, or that we're going to exceed those, or that we're going to have to justify it a little bit more because they were thinking their home was worth 600,000 and it's really worth like 570. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay. In addition, if we know we're going to have a hard sell on the property that they think is worth 600,000 that's not, we want to bring in their competition. So we're going to make sure that we come with listings that are active, that are similar floor plans, maybe even a little further out. Maybe, you might look at the whole city of, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes that are 1,500 to 1,700 square feet and see what they're listed at, so that they can see what the competition is. And we're going to sell it to them that way, right? I'm assuming the house was like 1,500 square or 1,600 square feet is what my brain was thinking, which I probably didn't communicate to you all. Right. So then that way I can pull out, and here's the competition. Like, I know you were hoping for this, or I know you were thinking your home was worth this, but I actually think it's a little bit more. But here's our competition. Here's what we're up against. So when I tell you there's a range of like 560 to 570 is where I would list it. Here's why, because this puts you in direct competition with all the other homes that are priced in your that are in the similar square footage, have similar bedrooms and bathroom counts, similar lot sizes that are currently on the market. And, if we price it closer to like, the lower end of that range, that puts you really competitive for everything out there on the market. Okay, does that make sense? Maybe like, oh yeah, that does make sense. Right? So we're just going to help them draw those conclusions. Any questions? Sometimes what works really well when we do a range is we take a piece of paper, or we flip one of the comps over, and we take our pen and we put a line there with a line there and go, you know, I'm gonna recommend that you list it somewhere between 560 and 570,000. And ideally, and I may set this up right, so I'm like tricking their brain, right? To where I think it should be listed. And, you know, kind of right here is kind of that sweet spot at like 565. Right now, I've led them to believe that, oh, here's why she chose that range. Here's what makes sense. And that's what she seems like an expert. And she's saying the sweet spot's 565. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's list it at 565, right? So sometimes that visual of drawing like a line graph with your number in the middle, that will help them to be led to your decision. Okay. Any questions about that process? Your goal is to get buy-in. But remember, if we look at the market conditions advisory, which we covered yesterday, ultimately the seller's in charge of making the final decision on the pricing on their home. Okay, so let them make that final decision. So once you and the sellers have agreed on which price range is most suitable, sellers might ask at what price to begin, right? Hopefully we drew that line. You might say this is the range, and then they say, well, where would you start? You'd be like, the sweet spot's really right here. We like already led them to that decision. And you know, sometimes they may want to start at the top of the range. And so you may want to point out and have something like this in your listing presentation, right? Where you've got asking price in relation to market value, right? If the market value is 10%, or if you list the house at 10% less than market value, you've got 75% of the buyers look at it, 15%, you've got 90% of the buyers looking at their property, versus if you start listing it at or above market value, that goes down. So that might be a good case of, I think we can get it sold at 570, but if we list it at 565, I think we're going to end up with, you know, multiple buyers coming in and probably draw multiple offers on your property to help drive it up to that number. Does that make sense? Versus listing it at market value, kind of eliminating some of the buyers out that maybe are hesitant to push that high because they're afraid that it's going to go with multiple, and then we've limited our buyer pool. Okay, so we may want to have a graph like this in our listing presentation so they can see what that looks like. Okay. And you can always let them know, right? Like, I can guarantee that your home will sell. I just can't guarantee the price. All I can do is report what the market data shows. And what we must do together is choose that starting point that we're both comfortable with, and we'll go from there. Right? Ultimately, what's going to happen is when we put your house on the market, the buyers are going to tell us what your property is worth. All right. Once we've decided on a price, we've gone over our marketing, we've introduced ourselves, we've toured the property, then we're going to ask for the listing. You're not going to get a listing that you don't ask for. Okay, we need to be patient as we work through this process. You want to make sure you ask questions of them, encourage any questions, them to ask questions of you, anything that they haven't gotten answered yet. Encourage that discussion, and you're going to include the seller in the decision-making process. As we're leading towards making that closing and asking them for the listing, we want to start asking them those questions again that we know we're going to get yes answers to. Okay. We might confirm their time frame. We might confirm what it looks like once they're able to move, if it's a move they're excited about, right? We're going to work through all those things. And then that way, right, we can move towards the closing. And by doing a soft closing, what that means is that we're asking them questions in advance, asking them for those yes answers. So then when we say, are you ready to move forward and list the property with me? They're going to be like, yes, we are, because they've already said yes 5 times leading up to that. So that's a soft close. Okay. So by the time we're asking for the listing, we should have reviewed their motivations, right? What their motivation is for selling, their ideal time frame, their concerns, their criteria for choosing a professional. We're going to make sure that we review and discuss, right, my qualifications and how I meet their criteria for a professional. We're going to revisit what we talked about as far as price. We're going to make sure they're comfortable with that. We should have already presented the market supply research, right? List of homes, available comps, all that stuff. Then what we're going to do is we're going to secure that agreement, right? So, we're just gonna, as I mentioned previously, we're just gonna handle any questions that they have, any objections. We're gonna start asking them yes questions and then ask them if they're ready to. Something else that's really good at about this point, right before we ask for the business, is that we are going to set them up for here's what the next steps will look like. I know that you said you'd like to have it on the market in the next 2 weeks. So ideally what we would do in the next 2 weeks is I'd give you about a week to continue to prepare the house for sale. I'm going to shoot over all those recommendations that I have as things to do. In fact, before we wrap up today, I can always walk through with you and show you those things as well. And then on the, Monday before we're going to go live, I like to go live on either a Wednesday or a Thursday. The reason I like to do that is it gives the most buyers the potential to be able to see that your house is for sale before weekend showings. If we go on the market too close to the weekend, then not everybody has a chance to see your property is for sale and schedule times to see it. And if we go on too early, like on a Monday or a Tuesday, sometimes that's too much lag time before the weekend and your house gets forgotten about. So I like to go on the market on a Wednesday or a Thursday, which means we need to have professional photos done either on like Sunday or Monday that by that week that we're getting ready to go on the market. So we would probably schedule photos for Monday the 15th. Okay, in addition, I like to do pre-listing inspections on my listings because it helps to make sure that we don't have any surprises that pop up. You don't like surprises, right? And they'd be like, no, I don't like surprises. Perfect. So what I like to do, because we're a high military community, is I like to go ahead and have a pest inspection done. That's something that I take care of on my end. You guys don't have to worry about, except they're going to come out to your house. They're going to look and make sure that you don't have any termites, like our subterranean termites. They're going to make sure you don't have any, dry rot on the property. And if they do, they're going to put together a quote to get those things remedied. Our military clients, they used to need a full pest clearance where we had to take care of everything on that report. And now what they need for the most part is what we call a Form 33. It just verifies that there's no active infestation of bugs. Okay, does that make sense? The other thing that I like to do is a whole home inspection. That's going to look at the whole house, top to bottom. It'll give us an idea of what the condition of the home is. Because sometimes, when we live in a home, we forget some of the issues that we just deal with on a regular basis. And they're going to help identify those things. Number one, it's going to help you with disclosure to make sure that we don't miss anything in the disclosure process. And number two, it's going to give us a health assessment of the house so that we don't have any surprises when the buyer has their own inspection done. Some of those minor things you might want to take care of on your own. And then sometimes we maybe want to just wait and see what the buyer may want us to take care of. Does that make sense too? And they'll be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. And then you might be, in addition, once your house goes, once we have a signed listing agreement, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put what we call seller's coverage for our homeowners, like a home warranty on your house. And what that means is during the listing period, if something goes wrong, the dishwasher stops working, you now no longer have to go buy a whole new dishwasher. We call that home warranty up. And they, for, $80, they'll come in and either fix it or replace it. That way you don't have to worry about any of the major components breaking down during this listing process or while we're in contract. Nobody wants any big expenses then, right? And they're gonna be like, no, that's fabulous. Nobody else has mentioned that ever. Yeah, that's something I do for all of my clients, right? So we may want to go over what those next steps would look like. We're going to have all that stuff done by Monday of next week so that we can go live next on Wednesday, the 22nd, or whatever that date is. Does that sound like a good on market date for you? Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Perfect. And also what I like to do is that first weekend on the market, I like to host 2 open houses. That gives us an opportunity to connect with the neighbors to make sure they don't have anybody they would refer to the neighborhood to buy your house. It helps get the word out there when the house is new and helps bring lots of buyers through your property. Does that sound agreeable to you? And they're gonna be like, yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So is there anything that I haven't addressed for you so far? I'm gonna be like, no, I think you've covered it. Gosh, you are offering us everything that we wanted to in an agent. Perfect. So the next step is that we sign the listing agreement. Are we ready to move forward? And they're gonna be like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. Right? So you see how we took them through that process? Pretty simple. Any questions? Never hesitate to ask for the listing. Ultimately, sellers are looking for a go-getter, right? Someone that's going to be assertive, somebody that's going to take control of the situation. And we want to make sure that we possess those qualities that the sellers want. We're going to complete the listing paperwork right there. This is a good opportunity to remember on our listing paperwork goes the percentage of commission at which we charge. This is a great opportunity. Number one, remember, we don't require you to sell a property any commission. And it's a good opportunity to break that commission apart. That was one of the main things that came up in the lawsuits that are happening with regards to sellers' commissions and sellers paying buyers' commission, is that the sellers weren't really told what that part of the commission went to the buyer's commission, or kind of what that split was. So this is a good opportunity to say, so for listing your property, this is what I charge, right? What percentage are you going to walk away with? Whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever that percentage is. And then in addition, it's customary in our area, right? Something like that, that the seller offers a commission to the agent that brings a buyer to the property. Typically, that's going to be between X% and Y%. Are you okay with offering that as well? It makes the total commission this. And they'd be like, okay, that makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, this would be also an opportunity that if you were going to reduce it, if you represented the buyer, which I don't recommend representing the buyer on your listing, but if you were, you could address that as well. Or you could go, you could put together a graduated commission scale based on the sales price of the property. Like, hey, here's what we said was the ideal listing price, and here's what you said you wanted to sell it for is $570. So if I sell it for that, I get my base commission. But if we're able to go above that, then I get an extra 1/4%, or whatever it is. So you could do like a graduated commission based on if you do an outstanding stellar job and sell it for more than what they were expecting. It's totally up to you. There's lots of ways to do that, but that's a good way. If we're going over the listing paperwork, we definitely want to address that. And I would absolutely break it into, here's what I charge for the listing. That covers the cost of the inspections, covers the cost of the photos. It covers the cost of, remember, that home warranty, right? I'm going to pay for all of that out of pocket, as well as all of the marketing. So we're going to sell our value to them during that moment to make sure that they fully understand what we're going to do for them. And then we're going to talk about offering that commission to the buyer's agent and what's customary for our area. Any questions? If it's more than 2 weeks before that house is going to go on the market, usually what I do at that time is, hey, remember we said that like $568 was going to be the ideal on market price. I'm going to put that here on our listing agreement as the on market price. However, because it's still a month and a half out and you guys are going to do some work, we're going to revisit that about a week and a half before we go on market. We're going to repull comps. I'll come back and sit down with you and go over those and make sure that's still the best number to go on the market, or if we need to adjust it slightly. Does that make sense to you? Oh yeah, perfect. Right? So we're going to have that conversation as well. Okay, then we're going to ask them to sign that listing agreement. I try to fill out as much in advance as possible. So I maybe have everything filled out, their names on there, the brokerage information. I may not have the listing price or the listing period on there. Or I may not have the commission filled in until I actually sit down with them. And then I let them know what they'll receive electronically. Okay, that, hey, after I get back to the office today, I'm going to scan this in so that I can send you a copy of it. In addition to that, I'm also going to send you a few other documents that I need signed. One that talks about the water heater and smoke detector, that your water heater has to be double strapped. I did see it when I was in the garage, and your water heater is double strapped. And then also just stating that you have to have smoke detectors in the house. I'm going to send you over what we call a disclosure information advisory, which walks you through how to disclose information appropriately about your home. So that's a really important one to read through. You're going to get one that talks about the square footage and lot size that I'm going to pull from the tax basis. Yes, Anastasia.
So you give the client the comps, you discuss with them what you think their price. How do you deal with one that's no, I want this price, and it's way higher than what it should go for, and they're not budging.
Yeah, there's two options there. You can say, hey, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. Unfortunately, I don't think we're a good match. I don't want to disappoint you when listing your home. My goal is to get it sold. And unfortunately, at what you're wanting to list the price at, I don't feel like I can successfully sell your home at that price. And I'd rather turn you down now than disappoint you later. So you can turn them down and walk away from the listing. The other option is, I know you want to get top dollar for your home. We've talked about the strategies. I know you're kind of set on having it listed at that amount, and I'm okay coming on the market at that. However, after 7 days on the market, if these things haven't happened, if we don't have an offer on the property, we haven't had at least 10 showings on the property, then what I would like to do is do a price adjustment. So I'd like to kind of work out with you in advance what those price adjustments would look like and when we're going to do them based on these criterias. Does that make sense? And they're going to be like, okay, that's fair. Sure. Right. So we can set those price adjustments up ahead of time for somebody who's listing way above what we feel like would be market value. So we can either turn them down or we can set up those kind of pre-planned price adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah. Mark?
I'm sorry, something happened. I missed. How long did you, when you were explaining that to the client, what was the time period that you were saying to reduce the price?
Oh, I'd probably give them 7 days.
Okay, 7 days.
Yeah, so if we come on the market on a Wednesday, by the next Wednesday, we're having that conversation or I'm doing that price adjustment. If I've got somebody that's going to list too high, I've probably got it in as part of my listing agreement that on this date, if these things aren't happening, the following price reductions will happen on these dates. So that I don't even have to go back to them. It's already part of our agreement. Yep. But I probably review it every 7 days. And that doesn't mean, for somebody who is priced appropriately for the market, if the market's sitting just a little bit, it's not that big a deal for it to go beyond 7 days. For somebody who's priced what I feel like is appropriately, we may let it go 2 weeks before we talk about a price adjustment. But for a property that I know is listed too high, I want to revisit that as soon as possible because I don't want that property to get stagnant on the market way overpriced.
Can I ask you one more question?
No,
Okay.
no,
What
go
are your
ahead. What?
thoughts on Bay Area realtors coming into Solano County, trying to get Bay Area prices for the homes here?
Yeah.
Because I had 2 in my neighborhood. One went with a Bay Area realtor, and they put the house on the market for 600,000. And there was one around the corner, same footprint, same upgrades. The one around the corner went on the market for 575. That one actually sold, and the other one in the court, they ended up lowering the price. So, I mean, so if we were to go into the Bay Area, do we go based on, should the realtor have gone based on the area's comps, not what they think it would go for in the Bay Area? It seems like what they were doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You should always, no matter where you're selling the property, you should always go with the local comps for sure. 100%. And there's nothing you can do about agents that are going to come in and promise the world and not be able to deliver on that, except for, if you're meeting with that same seller, you're going to set your value up. You're going to show them with the comps and the details and the stats of why you're recommending what you are to build your case for it. And it is okay if some Bay Area realtor or any realtor comes in with a house that's overpriced. You can call that agent and ask when that expiration date of their listing agreement is, or I think you can also pull it in the MLS so that on the day that gets ready to expire or the day of the expiration, you can reach out to that client and say, hey, I know your property didn't sell. I've been watching it. Remember, we sat down and talked, and here's what I told you. I'd like the opportunity to sit down with you again for the opportunity to potentially relist your house for you and get it sold. Yeah, absolutely. But there's nothing you can do about any agent, no matter where they're from, locally, not local. coming in and listing houses too high. Or again, making promises that they're not gonna be able to uphold. All right, oh, here's the automatic price reductions, right? We're gonna talk about if somebody wants to list it too high. Or if we're in a point where the market's like dropping, we may want to set that up in advance too. Our goal is to not price ahead of the market. We want to price with the market, but we can set up those automatic price reductions. And for the most part, it's going to be based on showings and offers. Do we have showings and did we get offers? Okay, if we're not getting showings and we didn't get any offers, and we know it's price based, then we want to adjust the price. If we know it's just the complete market, then we may want to hang out a little bit longer. Two different opportunities there. All right, any questions before we wrap up for the day? It's 12:06. Jillian, I'm so glad that it was helpful. I do have here, if you're still on, I have another tool. Hold on. It's somewhere. All right, hold on. We're going to copy. I'm going to paste this link in the chat box. And then I'm going to share the screen. Hold on. One more little tool that's in the chat box. It's probably not set up to share appropriately, but I'll fix that. That I will send you off with is this Google Doc for a killer listing presentation. And the reason I like this, number one, it talks about what to do, the step-by-step process leading up to, and then also through the listing appointment. But then it also has objections on here. So you've got like 10 objections for listing the house. And it's got those handlers, so you can be practicing those with your accountability partner. Things like, we want to try selling it ourselves, right? Discuss the challenges of selling without a professional assistant and highlight the benefits of working with an experienced agent. So that's not what you would say. You would actually like fill that in, right? We're not ready to sell yet. The handler for that one be explore the reasons for waiting, provide insight into the current market conditions, giving them a broader perspective, right? So it just talks about all these different objections and how you would handle those. So that is in the chat box. I'm going to set it up to make sure that you can view it, because it doesn't do you any good in case you can't view it.
And the home warranty thing again, you said just contact the home warranty people and put, what was it again?
The seller's coverage.
Seller's coverage. Got it.
Yep. So when your listing goes active, you want to have seller's coverage on it for your sellers. It's like $110 a day or $138 a day. So it's going to cost you like $40 for the whole listing period. Assuming your house is priced appropriately. And it covers those it does two things. The number one thing is it covers your sellers during that escrow period to make sure that they don't have any major expenses that come up on a house that they're selling in case something breaks, because like 50% of the time something's going to break. Or something might come up in the home inspection that you want covered, right? So that you didn't even know was broken. The second thing that it's going to do is if the buyers opt for, so you want to let in your private remarks that sellers have a seller's home warranty policy through Fidelity National Home Warranty or whatever it is, right? And then that way, if the buyer chooses the same company to have their buyer's coverage through, it eliminates for the buyer the pre-existing conditions clause in the home warranty plan. Okay, so it makes it magical for the buyers. So day one, when the buyers move in and the dishwasher's not working, they can call that home warranty and they'll come out and look at it and either fix it or replace it, instead of saying, oh, well, you know, you've only been in the house for 24 hours. So that was pre-existing. We're not going to cover that. If we had seller's coverage in place, it covers it, but it has to be through the same company, the sellers and the buyer's coverage.
So vacant or occupied home, it's recommended.
Say that again.
Vacant or occupied, it's recommended.
Absolutely. It's
Okay,
even more likely on a vacant home that you're gonna have more issues that arise when that buyer first takes possession of it. Or during the inspections, because if the dishwasher's been sitting unused for 3-4 weeks, because that house is vacant, the seller's already moved out, there's a good chance that seal's gonna not work because it hasn't been run on a regular basis, or things aren't gonna work right. The garbage disposal is gonna freeze up because nobody's been using it. All those things. Absolutely. All right, fabulous. Any other questions, thoughts, or ahas from today's class before we close out? All right. Thank you so much. We will see you not tomorrow because it's the office meeting tomorrow. Yes, office meeting tomorrow, should be tomorrow. So we will not see you tomorrow, but we will be on tomorrow evening, and we'll be diving in at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. Same link. We'll be talking about the One Design and One Creative and how to jump in and utilize that system. We'll probably even talk about like how to send out postcards. So if you want to know how to send postcards from there, it's pretty simple. It's all like they pick the addresses for you. It's pretty cool. So I'll show you how to do that as well. Tomorrow at 7.
thank you, Amy.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Amy.
You are welcome.